What is going on, guys? My name is Tim Ruswick, and today we've got another daily game development video. This one I think is going to be inspired by a Pablo Picasso quote because I think this is really relevant, and it's something that's been coming up a lot. So, real quick before we get in, I want to kind of share some backstory. What I'm about to share, definitely will help you with design. It will help you learn game design. It'll help you learn how to make the right decisions when you design your game. And for me, when I started it, I always wondered what the right answer was, right? I try to look into books and courses and all kinds of stuff to learn the right way to make games. But the reality is games are art, and every game is made differently. And, I'm in a weird position now where I've made a couple games on this channel. I've shared a bunch of my work on this channel, and now people come to me for advice for game development, which I always thought was, it's kind of weird me being a dude that just makes games, and then I end up looking for the answers to how to make games, and then people come to me for the answers to get. It is what it is, but there's something that people ask me a lot. They always ask me Tim, what's the best way to do this? Or I have this game. They ask me specific questions. I get this with careers a lot too. Tim, should I go indie or should I work on my career? And those are questions I can't answer, right? Those are no way, shape, or form am I prepared to answer that. I don't know anybody. I don't know things they've been through. I don't know their skill sets. I don't know their drive. And even if I did, I'm not them. I can't make life-altering decisions for them. And I know we all want people to make those decisions for us. So it's frustrating sometimes when we have to make the decisions ourselves. But in design, in game design specifically, designing games, it's really complicated sometimes to make the right decision. Because often you won't get any direct feedback on it. If you design something to be hard, let's say you're trying to make a Dark Souls kind of game. You design something to be hard, and a bunch of people quit because it's hard. Have you succeeded, or have you failed? Have you succeeded because you made a hard game, or have you failed because a bunch of people don't want to play your game now? So I said all of this to kind of say this, and the Pablo Picasso quote that I want to share is learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. So that quote has really resonated with me. I wanted to make sure I got it right, so I had to read it because I tend to elaborate on things. But what that quote means, I think, at least the way that I interpret it, is to artists break rules, right? They design things the way that they want to design things. They make things the way they want to make them. And in game design, there's a lot of common practices that are kind of commonly accepted. And if you ask for advice from a lot of different game developers, you tend to get the same general advice from a lot of different people. And when you're a beginner, the general advice is good to take, because a lot of times the general advice is passed down from multiple people that have experienced some of the same things, and they've learned from those things, and they kind of came together and formed this piece of advice. Things like, on your first game, make sure your scope isn't too massive, right? Dedicate to finishing a project. Stuff like that is really general, but really important advice. You also get a lot of design stuff, pay attention to your player, play test your game, make sure, whatever. If you're designing a specific type of game, let's say on platformers, there's a lot of specific advice that you can find. If you just Google around how to make a platformer, how to design a platformer, you'll find a bunch of different websites on platformer design, on jump design, collectibles, enemies, enemy types. And all of that advice is good to follow, right? But it's good to follow when you're learning. And here's what I think Pablo Picasso meant by that quote. I feel like in order to make something truly artistic, you can't just start out as a rebel. You can't just start out breaking all the design rules that everyone before you has kind of put together, right? You can't just make whatever the hell you want in the beginning. because it's not going to come out right. It's not going to look great. It's not going to work great. But I think once you know the rules, then you can break them. You have to learn the rules first. And I think this applies to game design just as much as it does to art or music or anything. I think learning how people traditionally make this art form, how the design rules they traditionally have, the things that they hold dear, the genres that they fall into, or like in music, learning about the different beats and how the different sounds intersect with each other, and maybe even learning how to write music. Even if you want to be a renegade, you want to be some crazy outlier, you want to make something crazy, the chances of you making something crazy and great when you don't know all the traditional rules of design, when you don't pay attention to some of the better design rules or color theory or all this stuff. Like, there's so many different things, especially in games, right? You got music, you got art, you got programming, visual effects, you got feedback, you got all kinds of stuff. So when you're beginning and you try and make something crazy, it can be crazy and bad. But once you know all these rules, once you've made a few games the traditional way, once you've learned things the boring route, right? Like once you've made Pong, once you've made a Tetris clone, or once you've made, all these different things, once you've tried a few things the traditional way, once you've gone through some of these traditional channels, once you've made some traditional design decisions, I think that's when you can start really breaking the rules in your favor. You can start twisting things and saying, you know what? Why does it have to be that way? A perfect example of this is card games, and I love this example. So every card game, every trading card game that I've ever played, because I played a whole bunch. I played Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, Pokemon. I played the Lord of the Rings card game. I played Dragon Ball Z card game. I played all kinds of card games. Okay, and all of them had one thing in common. There's a traditional rule, a design rule in all these card games that each player draws a card every turn. That's just how card games work, right? I draw a card, it's my turn. You draw a card, it's your turn. That's how all these games work, every single one of them. Gwent comes along, and this is not a traditional card game, it's a digital card game, but it's still a thing. Gwent comes along and has you draw all of your cards at one time. All the cards, just they're in your hand. And that's all the cards you get for 3 rounds. I think you draw like 2 or 3 per round or something like that. But that was a rule that existed in every single card game imaginable. No one questioned that rule because no one even thought to question that rule. That's a design decision that has been in card games since the beginning. That's what card games are. Drawing a card every turn. If you decide to make a card game and you just decide to break all rules, chances are you're going to make a shitty game. And I'm just being real here. Like, if you're just breaking rules for no reason, you're going to make a shitty game. But if you learn all of those rules, if you learn all those design decisions, if you study a game like Magic the Gathering that's able to go on for 10, 20 years, without fail, if you study these design decisions and how all these ecosystems work together, how the economies work in all these different games, like Yu-Gi-Oh, it's a really card-based economy. The more cards you have, the more power you have in